leadership training program led by world-class educator, Dr. Asaked Abdul, and thank you for coming in this Saturday. Before I start introducing Mr. Daniel Koroma, I just want to talk about a little bit about leadership. John F. Kennedy once said, leadership and learning are indispensable to each other, which means we always have to listen, learn, and go out and lead. So education is the key part of leadership training. Having said that, before we start, I want to welcome Dr. Koroma, Business Liason Office at the Montgomery County Government in the state of Maryland. He is the first African immigrant appointed by the County Executive Office. Mr. Koroma was also one of the leaders engaged by the White House when President Obama was planning to come up with a comprehensive immigration plan. He's also the founder of the African Caucus here in Montgomery County, and he's engaged with the African community. So we have one of our top world-class leaders here among us. Thank you for coming. Having said that, please come and say a few remarks for our board. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good. Again, a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I always take this as a privilege to really have a conversation around what it takes to move a community, in terms of forward. And you'll hear from, of course, other dynamic speakers, and one of whom I've had the privilege of knowing for many, many years, who is Dr. Clement Salmon. So he's also a dynamic leader that you would hear from as you go forward. So again, you've heard a little bit about my background, Daniel Koroma. I started in the county government as a volunteer, and for 3 years I was a senior fellow, which was a volunteer position in the county government. What led me to do that? So there's a definition, there are many definitions of leadership, but let me share one with you that was shared with me by my professor at Harvard. He says, leadership is accepting responsibility to enabling others to achieve shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. He said it requires to organize effectively, and organizing is required to make democracy work, developing the leadership of others as they learn to turn their communities into constituency and transform their resources into the power they need to achieve their goal. So I sat in Professor Marshall Gantz's class as he was teaching. Marshall came from the civil rights movement. He's a white man who was at Harvard and decided to leave Harvard because he wanted to be part of the change that was taking place in the 60s here in America. As many of you know, that in the civil rights movement, it was simple. America had made a promise that all human beings in this country are equal. But that was not true. And so the fight for equal rights and justice touched Marshall's heart and said, you know what, I'm going to drop out of Harvard and I'm going to go to Alabama. And he ended up organizing, him together with others, the Montgomery bus boycott. The Montgomery bus boycott was the preamble to many things that happened in the 60s because it was simple. There were more black people riding the bus in Montgomery, Alabama than white people. And with Marshall's team and others who were organizing, they said, well, we should not only talk about protesting, we should not only talk about how do we make sure we are able to get others to see the plight of African Americans here in Alabama. What they did was they said, let's show an impact. If all black people stop riding the bus, what would happen to the bus? The bus system needs money to operate. And so as a result of that, Marshall again had a very successful campaign. And I say that to say, that was something I learned to say, listen, even one person can make an impact. And that preceded, again, Dr. King and all the other civil rights leaders that we know now and we celebrate so well and deservingly. And so in Montgomery County, this was a great opportunity. We had our first African American leader who was transformational to be, to say the least, because we're talking about an affluent Montgomery County, a place where there are more, at that time, more, white people than people of color. And he had just gone through an entire campaign convincing people that he was going to build a bigger table. And as he kept saying that, people were still worried. Okay, well, is he going to remove me from the table and put somebody else at the table? Remember, you have a black man running for county executive in a very affluent county. So he says, no, everyone who is at the table will stay at the table, but we'll build a bigger table and bring those who are currently not at the table. So I saw this as an opportunity. After the transition, a colleague of mine who is a professor at Howard University was part of the transition team, and he says, hey Daniel, I think this is a great opportunity for you. At that time I was at the private sector, living a very comfortable life. I don't want to be troubled, I don't want anyone to trouble me. But he then says, hey, can you imagine the impact it will make for you to serve with the first African American county executive? This preceded President Obama, by the way, right? I'm like, yeah, that's a great opportunity, because it will be a great legacy to attach myself to, knowing him as well, knowing our county executive at that time, because he was also a professor at Howard University at the law school. And I was like, absolutely. So you want to find and attach yourself to people, because we're all learning from people. And so long story short, I then decided to volunteer. And I was so intrigued in terms of his leadership style, but also intrigued at the opportunity that existed for the new table that was being built. And so decided to create an advisory group. So created an African Affairs advisory group, and then created a Caribbean American advisory group. But again, as I say, I was a volunteer, and remember this is around 2008, 2009, no, actually 2007, 2008, so the global economic crisis was also hitting very hard, so there was no money to pay anyone to take that position. So I advocated, now there's a seat now at the table. Who will fill the seat? That person needs to be paid, but there's no money to pay the person. So I lift up my hands again, I said, okay, I'll volunteer. And volunteered for 3 years while organizing the community. But remember, let's talk about the African community. At that time, there were many movements in the African community in the metropolitan area. The Pan-African movement, the others who were organizing based on country of origin. So you have the Cameroonian, very well organized, the Ethiopians, very well organized, the Ghanaians, the Sierra Leoneans, and so people were organized based on the country of origin. And part of my thinking and the thinking of many that we all work together was, we may see ourselves as Ethiopians, as Cameroonians, as Sierra Leoneans, but when people see us, they see us as Africans. So we have that shared identity that we don't even recognize ourselves. So the African Affairs Advisory Group became that tool that I used to say, how do we bring in folks from different parts of Africa who are in the diaspora to ensure that we create that one identity, that's how people see us in the first place. And so Mr. Mumin Barry from Somalia was one of the co-chairs. Ms. Sophie Sise from Gambia. So we made sure at least we address East Africa and West Africa, right? So nobody would say, oh, is this an East African thing? Is this a West African thing? And so those were the two that started the advisory group as co-chairs. And then one of the things that they did that was transformational was to say, listen, we realized that many people would see us and would wonder how we got to where we got to. And they said, that's fine, we will tell them our story, this is what we're trying to do. But this is what we're committing to, that after our first year, we will step down as co-chairs and let you create a pipeline where you can then ascend somebody else who is within the group to be either a chair or have two people become a co-chair. Why? Because we want to make sure we're able to develop more leaders who will be able to serve the broader community. Remember, there's one seat that was given to us, but then this advisory group, who are all volunteers as well, said, you know what, we want to create more leaders. Long story short, since 2008, when the advisory group was formed, to now we currently have a total of 32 leaders that have been developed in the advisory group. So the succession plan is that you have a chair or co-chairs, and you have vice chairs. So you can have co-vice chairs as well. So 2 leaders in the top, 2 leaders who are understudies. And what ended up happening is that as the chairs are stepping down, they serve every year. So every September, there's a transition between the chairs and the co-chairs. The chairs, I made sure that I started finding policy areas where they have interest for them to then continue to lead. Because the opportunity is that when you're a chair, you are exposed to many of the county leaders. You go to many of the events because you will go and represent, remember that seat at the table? You go and represent the community there. And so the first co-chairs that basically exited, Mumin was more passionate about politics, so we helped him and elected him as the first African elected official in Montgomery County in the Central Community. Sophie was passionate about about education, so we helped her, and she was a part of the NAACP Parent Council. But what she would do there is that when members of our communities have problems with the school system, Sophie is the expert who we will refer them to, and she will advise the parents on their rights, the child's right. But if it became something where there's a bigger problem, she will mobilize the NAACP, working with the parents, and they will go to these meetings. So I say all that to say, subsequently, Josephine came, Reverend Kennedy came. Josephine was passionate about healthcare, so she formed an organization. We started building these institutions as we went along. So to wrap all of this up, again, I'll go back to Marshall School, which is leadership is one that requires organizing. But leadership is also one that recognizes the fact that you cannot do it by yourself. Right? So Marshall would say, hey, a leader is not somebody who walks alone. A leader is somebody who, when they walk with people. One of the reasons why I'm so happy that we're having this conversation today is the fact that there's so many leaders that are needed in the community. Here in Montgomery County, here in the Washington area, but also in our home countries. And when I say leaders, not those that just proclaim themselves as leaders, but those who have a proven track record of organizing people, and organizing in the sense that shared, the knowledge, because it demands that you have the knowledge of how to organize, but how to also inspire, how to motivate people, for them to trust you enough so they can walk with you. I don't want to say follow you, because some people say leaders have people who follow them. I believe that leaders have people who walk with them, because they are this form of leadership that many of us have experienced, especially in Africa, where there's only one person who should know everything, and everybody has to go to that person. It could be even within the classroom, it could be within the community, where they say, oh, you want something, go to that person. Or when somebody comes, or a group come to talk to the community, that person is yeah, she's the one, or he's the one that speaks for us. Most of the time it's a he, not a she. Right? Or it could be the dictator, right, who says, no, everything has to come through me as a leader. But then I believe in this form of leadership, which is an open arm leadership, which says, you know what, we can all either hold hands together or we can all come together, right? So I don't have to be the expert in everything. If your passion and your skill set is good in one thing, then let's work on it. You work on it. My passion, my skill set is another thing. I will work on that. So my passion is in business. I was in the private sector before I started volunteering, and I decided to stay in county government. So long story short, after 3 years, they said I cannot volunteer anymore. So they created a part-time position for me. So I started working part-time for the county, and then later on worked full-time. And in the transition, because there's a new administration now, I was asked to basically lead the small business. There's a business solutions group. And so that's basically what I do as a business liaison now. So my passion is business. How do I help small businesses grow from the bottom up? What resources and tools would I first of all identify that are needed to help them grow? But more importantly, how do I get them to realize that, hey, government can be a force for good when it comes to helping you grow your business? That's leadership. There are other forms of leadership that all of us need to practice. I don't think, if you ask me, there's no one was born, to say a leader. I mean, there's some folks who were born with certain skill sets, which, it's innate. But most of us have to learn what it means to be a leader. Most of us have to practice in terms of the things that we have seen others do. But beyond that, take it to the next level. And so that's my challenge to all of you today, which is after this workshop, find a place. Find a place where you have a passion, or you can actually exercise your passion. It could be maybe in your school board, if you have children in school, or even if you don't have any children in school. But if your passion is how do I make sure education, is accessible by all, right? So I don't call it, achievement gap, I call it opportunity gap, because I believe every child has, the ability to achieve if you give them the opportunity, right? So if your passion is that you don't like to see children not, achieving their goals, then guess what? Make sure you use your passion in that way. You will be a leader in that field. It could be healthcare, right? You see how people struggle to understand healthcare. And your passion will be to be simple. Hey, how do I train people to understand that, hey, this is how you pay your premium, or this is how you access healthcare? What are the options that are out there if you don't have, insurance? That could be your passion. And I can tell you that there are many people who will benefit from knowing the clinics that are in your area that you already are familiar with. It could be, there's a lot of things. Let me just leave it that way. But all I say is that I ask you to not just get the information today, but for you to take action. Because there are many people who really, their lives depend on your leadership. But more importantly, I think collectively, we will be able to make the impact that we really want to make. So I really want to thank Dr. SF for the invitation. And as I say, I look forward to working with you, but also with everybody that's here. My information is available online, but also Dr. Asage will also give it to you if you need that. I don't know if there's any question, but I really want to thank you this morning for this opportunity. Of course, thank Dr. Salman, who is the Dean of Montgomery College, one of the Deans of Montgomery College students, and for his leadership, because he's really shown me his leadership as well over the years that I've worked with him. So let me stop there for now, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you.